Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. I am Buckeye Politics, your favorite Ohioan, and this video is going to be a very interesting video because it is going to be a collab between myself and Old Line State Politics. He is a good friend of mine and another great election YouTuber. I highly recommend his channel. You should go subscribe. If you did not tell by the title, this video is going to be a comparison between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis for who would be the better candidate to run for the 2024 election. He will be doing Donald Trump, his flaws and benefits, and I will be doing Ron DeSantis' pros and cons. With that, I'm going to send you to Old Line for his coverage of why Donald Trump should be the nominee.
2024, without a doubt, being difficult for Democrats to hold the Senate and retake the House of Representatives, the presidential election is a much different story. Former President Donald Trump has already announced his candidacy for president in 2024, while many Republicans are starting to hint at a possible run. We will look at how electable President Trump is and what his paths to victory are. There are many obstacles that Trump might face, with poor performance in the midterms, being impeached twice, and with his sometimes rude remarks. Besides all that, President Trump has been proven to defy the odds. Donald Trump previously served as the 45th President of the United States. He was the Republican nominee in the 2016 presidential election and won the election with 304 electoral votes, the Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton, who received 227 electoral votes. That election shocked the entire world, and many pollsters had the race as a Hillary Clinton win. During Trump's presidency, he lived up to most, if not all, of his campaign promises to rebuild the economy, strengthen our military, and made the biggest tax cuts ever recorded for a president's first term. The Trump administration did more than any modern presidential administration to help protect church rights and religious freedom. With all of this, for him, you would think Trump would be guaranteed another term. It's a little bit more complicated than that. You see, even with the Trump administration doing all that good for the American people, there were still some issues President Trump was never able to avoid. For instance, getting blamed for COVID-19 getting out of hand, not being able to get the GOP on board with a bill to end Obamacare, and being blamed for a so-called insurrection on the Capitol when boycotting. But the biggest thing he was known for is trying to overturn an election when there's that it was stolen. So with all of this being said, let's see how electable Trump would be. If we were comparing Donald Trump to Ron DeSantis, there is no doubt in my mind that Ron DeSantis would be more electable. Looking at the electoral map, we can see many of the same states voting for Donald Trump like in 2020, but there are many states that he must win to reach the 270 mark. The first state is Nevada. Nevada recently banked hard to the right when they voted out their now former governor, Steve Sisolak. With Donald Trump's help, former sheriff of Clark County, Nevada, Joe Lombardo, was able to win the Republican primary with 38.4% against Joseph Gilbert's 27%. With that primary win, Lombardo ultimately won the general election with 48.8% against former Governor Steve Sisolak's 47.3%. Because of Governor Lombardo's victory in the 2022 midterms, most likely his term as governor will help Donald Trump in 2024. Donald Trump will most likely win the state with around 0.7% of the vote against Joe Biden. The second state we will be looking at is Wisconsin. Wisconsin is quite interesting because they are more conservative in the state than Minnesota and Michigan. But even in a year that was supposed to be a good cycle for Republicans, they reelected their unpopular incoming governor, Tony Evers, by 3.3%. While polls during the midterms had the Republican Tim Michels winning by 3 to 4 points. With that loss for the GOP in Wisconsin, it has left many to doubt Donald Trump because of his endorsement of Michels. Many have started to question whether this was a GOP fail or a Donald Trump fail. With the poor performance in the Wisconsin Senate race between incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson and Democrat Mandela Barnes, Johnson ultimately won re-election, but with much closer margins than expected. Those margins were 50.4% to Senator Johnson and 49.4% for Mandela Barnes. Donald Trump will ultimately win this state back with around 0.3% to 0.7%. The third and final state on this list is the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a pure toss-up, but in order for Donald Trump to win the election, he needs Pennsylvania. The GOP in the state put up very Trumpy candidates for Senate and governor. For the U.S. Senate, it was Dr. Mehmet Oz, who was defeated by former Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Fetterman beat Oz by 4.9%, and that was a crushing blow for the GOP in Pennsylvania and the rest of the United States. The governor race was a quite different story. Doug Mastriano won the Republican primary with 43.8% to Lou Barletta's 20.3%. The Democrat primary was a cakewalk for Josh Shapiro, who was uncontested. Doug Mastriano ran a very different type of campaign from traditional candidates. He ran a grassroots style campaign. And if done right, they are sometimes successful. In this case, it was not. But come election night, the Mastriano campaign knew that all hope was lost. Sadly, Josh Shapiro won the race with 56.5% to Mastriano's 41.7%. In the end, it was a crushing blow for Donald Trump and the GOP, being that Doug Mastriano was Trump's hand-picked candidate. Donald Trump is relatively well liked in Pennsylvania among Republicans and independents, but it is enough to get him over the finish line. If he loses PA, it is a make or break for his campaign. In my opinion, I think Donald Trump could win the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania if he plays his cards right. This would be a must needed state for him if he wants to see the Oval Office again. In the end, Trump is an okay candidate for the GOP in 2024, but it would be a close election from the Electoral College standpoint. Now I will hand it back to Buckeye.
Thank you, Old Line. So Ron DeSantis has been making a lot of headlines recently. People want him to run for president in 2024, and it makes sense. He's done an excellent job as governor of Florida, showing Republicans and conservatives what it means to govern as a conservative in a state, especially a former swing state like Florida. DeSantis has done a very excellent job, in my opinion. I like him a lot, and I think he has some certain electoral advantages that Trump does not. I think DeSantis would do very well in the Sun Belt region of the United States. This is a part of the U.S. that used to be overwhelmingly Republican, but we've been losing ground there. These are states like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and the like. So starting off in the state of Georgia, I think DeSantis would do very well there. I think he'd get Kemp very similar margins to Brian Kemp in the Georgia suburbs. Not saying that he would like win by like 8 points like Kemp did, but I do think he would do decently in the Georgia suburbs, and I think he would do very well in the rurals because rural Georgia is just solidly Republican. I mean, Trump helped make that Republican, but Georgia, especially rural Georgia, has always been overwhelmingly Republican. So they'll turn out for DeSantis. And DeSantis will probably have a lot of appeal with suburbanites. He did in Florida. He did very well in the suburbs that are very similar to the Atlanta types, the more upper class, younger, college educated suburbs. So I think he would do very well in Atlanta. And I think he'd probably win Georgia by 2 to 3 points. Instead of Texas, I think DeSantis would do very well in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This is an area that used to be overwhelmingly Republican, but a lot of people have been moving there. A lot of college educated liberals, a lot of African Americans, even some Hispanics and Asian Americans have been moving there, and it's been trending very quickly to the left. I think DeSantis would do a lot better than Trump in that part of the state, and I think he would do decently in the rurals as well as southern Texas. DeSantis did very well with Hispanics. He won Miami-Dade County in his governor race in 2022. And I think DeSantis would do very well in South Texas. He would continue the realignment going, and he would get Hispanic conservatives who have, voted Democrat their entire lives to continue to begin shifting towards the Republican Party. Arizona is another state I think DeSantis would do very well in. DeSantis would probably be a perfect fit for Arizona. I mean, Maricopa County is a very suburban, very college educated, very establishmentarian Republican county. I mean, Carrie Lake, he was a part. Well, I thought she would be a good fit for the county, and she probably, she was a newscaster there for 20 years, and she couldn't even win it. So there's clearly something about being a more establishment, more I guess polished politician when you run for office in Arizona. I think DeSantis would win Arizona by a couple of points, similar to Georgia, do very well in Maricopa County with the McCain, Romney type Republicans. I think he'd also do decently in the rurals. I don't see why any Republican in Arizona that wouldn't vote for DeSantis unless something crazy happened with Trump in the primary. So I think DeSantis would probably win Arizona. Instead of Nevada is another interesting one. I think DeSantis would make up some ground in the Reno suburbs. That's an area that used to be solidly Republican, very white, very college educated, very affluent area overall. And that is an area that had been trending away from the GOP. Adam Laxalt, surprisingly, did very poorly there. But I think DeSantis would do a little bit better. I think he'd also do decently in Clark County, Las Vegas, with working class voters, especially Hispanics in North Las Vegas. And I think he'd do a very good job. So that takes us to the Rust Belt, because if you look at the electoral map, as you see on your screen, DeSantis is not yet at 270. He has to flip Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. And this is where things get tricky. In the state of Pennsylvania, DeSantis as governor, what has DeSantis been focusing on as governor? It's been education, it's been crime to an extent, it's been, inflation. And Dr. Oz, I think, ran a very similar campaign to DeSantis on these issues. He didn't really run necessarily a quote unquote populist campaign. He kind of ran as a generic Republican, and he did very poorly in rural Pennsylvania. He did good in the Philadelphia suburbs, but he did very poorly in rural Pennsylvania, and he lost to John Fetterman, who's probably the worst candidate the Democrats could have put up. So Biden, I think, is a better candidate than Fetterman, excuse me. And DeSantis, I think he would do better than Oz. I don't think he'd lose by like 5 points to Biden. But DeSantis has to run on something else besides education, inflation, and crime, because clearly that message did not resonate with rural and working class voters in Western Pennsylvania that, were the Obama Trump type. So DeSantis could certainly run a good campaign and win the state of Pennsylvania, but I just don't think it's all that likely, to be quite frank. I think his statements on fracking when he ran for governor the first time and was in Congress might hurt him, as well as the stuff that he said about being supportive of free trade. Michigan, very similar story. Tudor Dixon ran a campaign focused on education, inflation, and crime, and she got absolutely crushed. Not saying DeSantis can't win Michigan. I mean, I'm sure it's possible. It just does not seem very likely to me, considering how past Republicans have done. And really, unless DeSantis runs on trade and protectionism and stopping immigration as big parts of his campaign, I mean, I'm sure he'll talk about it, but unless those are big parts of his campaign and he really hammers that issue home, I don't think he wins Michigan either. Same thing with Wisconsin. In 2004, George Bush did very well in the suburbs of Milwaukee, the Wow counties, and he did very well in the state. But unfortunately, he did not get good turnout in the rurals, and he lost. I think Wisconsin is the state DeSantis is most likely to flip in the Rust Belt. But at the end of the day, I still think Biden will win the state by about a point or so. I mean, I'm sure DeSantis could probably pull it off. I think it would be a complete toss up. But I do think Biden is probably very narrowly favored because I mean, even Ron Johnson and Tim Michaels struggled in the Wow County, so I'm not sure why DeSantis would do any better. And DeSantis would probably do worse in the rurals because he isn't really a protectionist, free trade kind of guy. So thank you for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please like and subscribe to both me and Old Line.